The first time I saw him, he was on his lunch break having a cigarette. He was tall, slender, and handsome, like my father. Now you understand this, the
Yes.
politics of inserting this like my father. This is how you write novels.
No need for an MFA, anybody. There it is, right there. He just saved you $60,000. Orhan Pamuk, as is self-evident from this room, is one of the most prominent and important writers in the world today. We are here tonight to discuss The Red-Haired Woman, his 10th novel, coming after a series of major novels marked perhaps most dramatically by his winning the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2005. Orhan's work has, over the years, explored the territory between the sacred and the secular, between East and West, rural and urban, past and present. It's marked by a deep and abiding interest in the power of memory, the power of melancholy, of nostalgia, and of the place of the individual and individual dignity in a time where ideology and the powers of family can sometimes cut across what one wants to do. If nothing else, what I would say is that the most important feature of Pamuk's work would be Istanbul, his native city. Istanbul has, I think, emerged in our collective global imaginary, the same way that Faulkner's Yoknapatawpha County, Joyce's Dublin, Marquez's Macondo have all occupied a certain place in our imaginations. Why is that? Because of the way that he has created an entire fictional world while moving chairs at the same time. Movement is so important to Pamuk's work, everyone. And so now what we're going to do is have a conversation, having offered this introduction, a conversation about Orhan's new novel. Well, we'll go from there into a larger conversation, I think, about his work and some of his abiding interests. There will be some time at the end for questions from you, and then as I understand it, he will be available for signing. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in offering a strong Toronto welcome to Orhan Pamuk. So, Orhan, we were chatting before we came on stage about any number of different things, but what I thought would make sense as a way into the conversation would just be if you could just say a little bit about what The Red-Haired Woman is about. What are some of the concerns of the book, and how did you approach them?
It has two faces. This novel has two faces. One is the realistic, is based on what I observed in 1988 when I was finishing or trying to finish one of my novels, The Black Book. I was in Heybeliada, one of the islands close 1 hour away from Istanbul, and in the land next to me, one night, a well-digger and his disciple arrived, and just like in the book, they tried to dig up their tent, and the next day, they begin to dig a well in the old-fashioned, 2,000-year-old way of finding water in Istanbul. And then I observed them because I'm a writer, and writers are not writing all the time. They're also paying attention to the, to the ants, to the clouds, to the people, to everything. And then, wow, it's interesting. They're digging a well. So after a while, they begin to say, oh, sir, can we have some water? Can we have some electricity? And then we get, some friendship or some relation. After a while, as they were finishing, after 3 weeks, they were happy. They found water. Wow, it's happiness. And as they were about to go, I said, I'm a writer. Can't we talk a bit? And then open my tape sound recorder. And this is a habit I'm very happy about. And I have a huge pile of interviews, which I may be inspired by or never use. And the guy, the middle-aged father-like guy, told me a story of digging a well in the west side of Istanbul, and at that time it was a barren, empty land, to find water, and he couldn't find water. This is the realistic part A, and the realistic part B. I was also, as they were working every day, finding it interesting that he was crushing, shouting, intimidating, ordering the disciple, not the child, but I thought he was a child or something. I don't know why I began to think about them as father and son. And then while at night, around 5 o'clock, they would cook some stew, do their meal, whilst they'll still work. At sunset, then they will open their portable TV, as in the novel, and then, wow, what a friendly conversation and tenderness they had in between. The old well-digger would say, explain, talk tenderly, and then did you have enough food, or that kind of thing. So compassionate, so attentive, which my father was not. My father was not around too much, and on the other hand, my father was never a Freudian father scolding me, angrily crushing me, always treated me and my brother like we're good, very intelligent or geniuses, and always praised us. So this kind of crushing father and a tender, attentive, compassionate father I never had. So the idea of father came to me this way.
In 1988, this book comes out in 2017. Now, I realize you were busy in the meantime, but...
Yes, believe me, Randy, I'm never lazy.
No. Why did it take 25 years? What was going on with? Why did you want to tell the story now?
As I get older, I have my mind is producing more projects than I execute, and then
Can I have 3 or 4 of them, maybe? Would that? Can I just take a few of them? Would that be all right?
Yeah, sure, I can give you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Witnesses. Okay, go on.
So my mind is producing more projects than I can execute, and I confess also, it's the most delightful, happy part of being a novelist, that you're just doing nothing and looking at the sky. Or my partner, girlfriend, asked, what do you do? I'm thinking, which is projects, what will happen in this novel, what will happen in that novel, I want to do this, do that. That it's impossible to write a novel, for me, if you do not entertain picture by picture the scenes. Anyway, I thought about this. What do I do with it? My models, I'm confessional, was I wanted to write a short novel on this subject because it stayed with me, how he dig up and couldn't find water. Something like The Old Man and the Sea, a brief novel in which, unfortunately, in The Old Man and the Sea, the mistake with the novel is that the boy is not in the boat. He leaves the guy, comes back, and he tells the story. Anyway, of course, it's a great classic. So I wanted to self-imposed short novel, which also have philosophical.
Yes.
So I thought about this, and I had so many projects, but this stayed with me. In the 27 years that went in between, I also had a second idea. While I was writing my novel, My Name is Red, I was reading also the old classical Persian, Ottoman, Islamic classical texts in a Borgesian manner, benefiting from their literary qualities, benefiting them as they are parable stories. And then at one point I was reading Firdevsi's Shahnameh. Since it sounds so strange and distant, I always say this, that makes Penguin very happy. It's a Penguin classic, by the way. Oh, then it's a legitimate. So I was reading, and a 3-page story in Shahnameh looked a sort of a mirror image of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex. The difference is, in Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, it's parricide, that is, the child kills the father. In Rustam and Sohrab, the father kills the child. But, the anxiety that I don't want to kill my father is exactly there. I don't want to kill my child. In Oedipus, it's God who foresees that Oedipus will kill his son, his father. In Rustam and Sohrab, why does he have this anxiety? Well, they're warriors, and they hide their faces. Their job is kill each other. And then the simple story is that this great warrior who occupies so many centuries, as in old classical epics, that has an affair, goes to West, has an affair with, of course, a king's daughter, and of course leaves her pregnant, and of course thinks that this will be a man, and of course he may kill him in the next war, leaves sometimes a bracelet, sometimes a ring, so that he identifies and doesn't kill him. But in the war, in the end, their hearts are, kills him and cries, father is crying. And then this is a very popular story. Go out to the streets of Turkey. This is a Persian classic, but Turks took Persia, just like Indians, for 300 years as political, cultural, musical, architectural model. Persia was the center, most sophisticated in a way. So this story stayed with me. That its difference between with Sophocles' story, its symmetry stayed with me. For a long while I thought about making a comparison between. Then I also realized that now that the well-digger and his disciple is in my mind, developed to be a sort of a father-son relationship, I wanted to continue with it, combine it, write a short story, treating all these old foundational myths of my civilization and European civilization. I also imply that when we honor Oedipus' killing of his father, and we honor it in a way, that when Sophocles wrote his play, he was, in the end, was accusing Oedipus. Well, you tried to run away from God's verdict. The oracle told you that you would, in the end, kill your father, and you didn't like it. God's verdict, he didn't like it. Wow, what an individual this Oedipus is. God says you're going to do it, and he wants to run away from it. And then he couldn't, but he was well-meaning.
Yes.
But when Sophocles wrote the play, the catharsis, that our judgment is this, that this guy, it's not that he slept with his mother and killed his father. That's not his biggest sins. His biggest sin is try to run away from God's verdict.
God's word.
And then crowds had a catharsis when he's dead. Although he's dying, we are happy because you cannot run away from God's verdict, and we are happy. But we moderns, in 1860, they restaged it in Paris. It was very successful, and the understanding was different now. We moderns honor Oedipus' individuality.
See.
He transgresses things, but we cry for him. He was well-meaning. He was a good boy. He wanted to run away.
He loved his mother.
Yeah. That part is not highlighted in painting and literature.
Right. Actually, I want to talk about that a little later. But one thing I find very interesting about your reframing and resituating of Oedipus alongside the
Shahnameh, Book of Kings,
is it intersects in this fantastic way with this kind of very immediately accessible story about a 16-year-old who decides one summer he's going to go dig a well. And his father, who's a leftist pharmacist, is absent. His mother is he doesn't want to tell his mother what he wants to do. And he goes off and has this summer where he has these remarkable experiences. And Orhan, I wonder, we talked about maybe you're reading a little bit just from that early moment in the novel where he kind of goes off, just to give us a sense of, independent of the myths that you're working with in the novel, just the practicalities, the beautiful, simple practicalities of the old way of digging a well.
Oh, okay. Now, after I did this first interview where 30 years ago, a well digger told me about not being able to find water in a barren land, it took me 30 years to write the novel. And then when I decided to write the novel, a short novel, I found old well diggers and interviewed them, this time not for the story, but for the technical details.
Yes.
How do you do a windlass? How do you do this? How do you do that? What was the costs? And in 1970s, the well diggers of Istanbul, who were doing business there for the last 2,000 years, had an immense happiness because there was so much immigration to the town, and the central municipality government could not supply water to these people who were building their own homes with their own hands, as I wrote in my previous novel, A Strangers in My Mind. So well digging was very important. One of the guys told me happily, I was managing 6 wells at the same day, that he was not inside. So are you doing okay? He was now in a sort of a chain of wells.
Right.
But then in mid-80s, when what they call in Turkish artesian.
Yeah.
These new machines derived. What they did in 3 months, or what they did in 3 weeks, the machine does in 3 hours.
Right.
So they were all finished. I care about also, as in my novel, My Name is Red, when hundreds of years of craft or business or art finishes, the sadness of it. But there was not that sadness about well diggers, because well diggers were essentially construction people, and they continued making forms and things with construction businessmen. They didn't lose their talents, they didn't lose their job, but that kind of finding water finished.
And one of the more interesting things you point out is when that happens, you mark it in the novel, it also leads to the kind of the depletion of resources in Istanbul itself.
That's a more complicated story. Yes. Once you have these artesian things,
yes,
and also they use a lot of dynamite when also digging wells.
Yes.
That makes this. I don't know about the land. I'm not a professor of this subject, but. Land is also a very fragile thing, that the water that is running around, beneath us, hundreds of meters, hundreds of kilometers, there is always water going around. But when you change the natural course of events, water is shy, goes down. And now it's even harder to find water in the old fashion because of this.
Now, if we could just stay on the well for 1 sec, I'd initially meant to ask you something about The Old Man and the Sea, because it was on my mind while I was reading the book. So when The Old Man and the Sea came out in 1951, Hemingway was interviewed, and he was asked...
I know what you're going to ask. I'm guessing, but yeah.
Do you think he was drunk during the interview?
No.
Okay, that wasn't what I was going to ask. I had to improvise very quickly.
No, I was going...
what does the shark represent?
No.
What does the fish represent?
Okay, then I thought... no. Okay, yes. First...
Is the well just a well? The way that the shark is just a shark for Hemingway?
If you write a short novel, it's open to allegory. They read it as an allegory. Allegory of this, allegory of that. And Hemingway was upset, or also sometimes narcissistic, about the fact that, of course, the old man is himself, and the shark is writing. Or artistic perfection.
Yes.
So, of course, there is this kind of, I was writing also, and observing them, but I don't go into that. My novel, Red-Haired Woman, is open to allegorical reading, but it's not a perfect medieval allegory. We are all moderns. It's a postmodern allegory in a way, or it's what the French call novel of ideas. It's a combination of realist story of finding water in a barren land, and I did really realistic research, intertwined with a sort of a comparison between the Persian story and the Greek story, and don't forget, in geography, Turkey is sandwiched in between, and at the center. Yes.
Now, I'm thinking about the way in which in the later part of the novel, I think for me one of the most fascinating parts of this is, I don't want to give it away because we all want you to buy 3 copies of the book. Something happens early on in the book with Jem, the young man.
Middle of the book.
Middle of the book, an event happens involving a bucket, and then he very quickly departs this town. He's also had this encounter with the red-haired woman. And he then decides to kind of live his life according to his interests in Sophocles and also in the Persian epic. How does, in your other books, memory is this rich source of melancholy richness. This is a book, though, where the main character is trying to get away from the past, trying not to think about it, which struck me as a different
while on the other hand, I must say that he is also tempted by it, that he runs away from a crime, then returns back to crime scene in an intellectual fashion, that he is also has his way of returning to his crime scene is intellectual, and he does also, for our benefit, a sort of an art history detective research.
Yes.
But we forgot that I also need to read something.
Oh, we forgot you had to read. That's right. That's right.
Now I'm jumping
Jump.
into the text.
Yes.
In the garden next to the orchard, a well was being dug. I would go over sometimes to watch the well digger work with his spade and pickaxe while two apprentices lifted and removed the earth their master has dug out. The apprentices cranked the two handles attached to a wooden windlass, which creaked pleasantly as they hauled up bucketfuls of dirt and tipped them over into a handcart. The younger one, who was about my age, would go off to unload the handcart as the older, taller apprentice would yell, "Here it comes," sending the bucket back down to the well digger. During the day, the well digger rarely emerged. The first time I saw him, he was on his lunch break having a cigarette. He was tall, slender, and handsome, like my father. Now you understand this and the
Yes.
politics of inserting this like my father. This is how you write novels.
No need for an MFA, anybody. There it is right there. He just saved you $60,000.
But unlike my naturally calm and cheerful father, the well digger was irascible. He frequently scolded his apprentices. I thought it might embarrass them to be seen getting told off, so I steered clear of the well when the master was out. One day in mid-June, I heard the sounds of joyful shouting and gunshots coming from their direction and went to take a look. Water had sprung from the well, and upon hearing the good news, the owner of the plot, a man from Rize, had come over to celebrate, gleefully firing his gun into the sky. There was an alluring smell of gunpowder in the air. As was customary, the landowner distributed tips and gifts to the well digger and his apprentices. The well would allow him to realize the various construction projects he had planned for his land. The city's water network had yet to reach the outskirts of Gebze, a place for some 5 years I spent my summer holidays. So implying my novels are slightly autobiographical. I never heard the master shouting at his apprentices in the days that followed. Bags of cement and some iron rods arrived on a horse-drawn cart one afternoon, and the master well digger set about lining the well with concrete before covering it with a metal lid. I spent a lot more time with the crew now that they were in such a good mood. One day, I walked over to the well thinking there was no one there. Master Mahmoud appeared from among the cherry and olive trees, holding apart from the electric motor he'd installed to power the pump. "You seem curious about this work, young man." I thought of those people in Jules Verne's novel who went in one end of the world and came out the other side. "I'm going to dig another well on the outskirts of Küçükçekmece in the European side. These two boys are leaving me. Shall I take you along instead?" Seeing that I was hesitant, he explained that if he did his job right, a well digger's apprentice could earn 4 times as much as an orchard watchman. We'd be done in 10 days, and I'd be home in no time. Now,
Can I ask you a question about what you read? One of the great themes of this novel, and really of your own writing, I'm thinking especially about your Nobel address, is the structural significance of reading literature to experiencing, encountering, making sense of the world around you as a person, and then also around your characters. So that, for me, the favorite moment, beyond the kind of lovely, beautiful technical detail, is his natural response to making sense of a well is Jules Verne, right? It's right away through a book, and throughout the novel, Jem responds to experiences with his reading. Right away, it's a structural thing. Why do you think we do that as human beings? Why is it so important?
There is no meaning in life without a text. That whatever we do, we have many, many layers of text in our minds. You know, religion is one major text, but then religion only talks about big things. How to reduce, is this clock or watch religiously correct? The religion doesn't tell me. So I need in between people who that yes or no. And novels are about that. Novels are also big narratives that reach the objects that religion doesn't touch because they are more worldly things.
Yes.
In that sense, that we always need text, and I'm a modern person. My religion is, in the end, literature, and I refer to literature, and I'm happy that when my characters also form themselves, the aura around them is whatever, if they're going, their voyage to the center of the world,
Yes.
that the novel I allude to, that there are always texts around things, or things seem clearer when I have a text about that in my mind, and I always go to that.
So, Orhan, that leads me to the kind of the question that's been screaming in my head the entire time I've been with this book. Why choose Oedipus as the text that this character is going to structure his life around, alongside
not only Sophocles' text, but also Firdevsi's
Yes,
text.
no, of course. I'm sorry, it's both. But in both cases, it involves a violence between a father and a son.
Yes, but I saw that violence, that I want, in a way, I am an ambitious novelist. Then I also had thoughts about, why didn't I write this without other texts? I consider myself a bit slightly guilty, or what Schiller had taught. I wrote a book called Naive and Sentimental Novelist, in which Friedrich Schiller's text about writing poetry. I'll just try to brief and simplify, but Schiller was jealous of Goethe. They were contemporary, they were exchanging letters. Goethe was writing poetry without caring about, is this right, is this ethically correct, does this mean something? He was, according to Schiller, he was a bit jealous and getting it wrong, but there is his point. Goethe was writing as if he is possessed by God. Poetry is coming to him. He may be cruel. He may be this. He is not calculating the effects. He is not calculating about the rhyme, this or that. He is writing boom, boom, boom. While poor Schiller, wow, is it right that I do this? Is it wrong that I do this?
Right.
And always jealous. But he is, in a way, more sophisticated than Goethe, paying attention to nuances,
Yes.
more attentive and more cerebral in many, while Goethe has also an animal strength,
Yes.
I am, in that way, a Schiller-like writer. I am what Schiller refers to him, maybe a wrong usage of, or today it seems sentimental.
Yes.
Why Goethe is naive. We have now a negative
Yes.
usage of naive, while sentimental is good for us. While Schiller wanted to be naive, that is, he writes poetry as it comes to him. Now, if I were a naive novelist, I wouldn't have these old texts with me. While I am not by nature, I am sentimental. That is, I'm worrying about, is this true? Will they understand? Why don't I could have written it like The Old Man and the Sea. Maybe it was a mistake, but that's how I am. I have to accept
Yes.
myself.
Yeah, no, right. Staying on that point, in so much of your work, you look at the differences of representation between different traditions. One of the insights of the novel that I found most fascinating was when Jem and his wife do a kind of tour of Europe, and they're sort of exploring different representations of Sophocles' play. And then they likewise, by way of some friends in both Tehran and then also Istanbul, they start to see early representations of Rostam and Sohrab and the event, the battle where the father kills the son. And you talk about what the Western tradition is willing to represent visually versus the Persian tradition. Could you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, okay, let's clarify this though.
Yes.
That in the end, Oedipus Rex is also about sleeping with the mother, and there's no picture of it, except in one Pasolini film that I also refer to it. While, and also it's killing of the father.
Yes.
Very little pictures.
Very little representation
Very
of
little
it.
pictures. My friend Elif Batuman, I said these things, found a picture and sent it to me, the writer Elif Batuman. While the father killing the son. My God, this is the most pictured, most popular scene in my part of the world. If you go to Google Islam miniatures, you will come across 5 minutes later. You will come father, that is Rustam, who killed his father without his son without knowing it, is crying and crying and crying and crying, and the mother is behind, and so she's also crying. And I asked this question behind, why are they so happy picturing this? My answer, or the answer that the book is suggesting is, actually, they are legitimizing the power of the father. The father is crying, just like we are crying for Oedipus. And once we understand, we accept Oedipus' cry, and we don't say, well, you're guilty, you should be dead. We don't say that this to Oedipus. We don't say, well, you're guilty, you killed your son. We don't say, oh, he's crying, he's guiltless. He killed his son just for the continuity of the state. He has to save the army, the country should be protected. The father can kill the children because he's a nice guy, but he has to do it, so forth and so on. A sort of a legitimization of authoritarianism that I see. There was this sinologue, Karl Wittfogel, which I allude to in the novel. I think politically incorrect. He was a sinologue, also well-versed with Frankfurt School, exiled to the United States. I think he taught in Frankfurt School, a new school, but he developed a sort of theories that I don't agree with, saying that in China, the hydraulic system, water and canals can only be built by strong authoritarian rulers. Independent princes will kill each other and could never achieve these canals that brought water, that brought economical growth. In my part of the world, if you dig a well, find water, civilization comes out of it. So my well digging and Wittfogel's or sinologue's Chinese canals allude to the same thing. That authoritarian father who shouts, or the authoritarian Chinese ruler who finishes off all opposition, are popular perhaps because they are serving something, they are bringing you water.
Now, late in the book, you talk about the centrality of the father figure, and I couldn't help but bring to mind your beautiful and stirring Nobel address, My Father's Suitcase, and it's a wonderful kind of articulation of your vocation as a writer and the relationship of that vocation to your own father. Now, backstage, you were saying that writers have to necessarily have nasty fathers, and yet yours is the exception to the rule. Did your own connections to your father, your memory of him as a would-be writer, did they figure it all in the writing of this novel?
Yes, as I told at the beginning, my father was an absent father, and never was a father in the Freudian sense that crushed me and my brother. We were very happy about that. In a way, my Freudian father was my mother or my brother. They were telling me, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. My father never said that. In that sense, My Father's Suitcase is, yes, about the importance of having a father or your relation with the father, but my relation with my father is not Rustam and Suhrab, neither Oedipus and this. In fact, also, my book also argues that when we read Freud, we think, my God, everyone in the world, even in, say, North Pole and China, is behaving like Viennese woman. Not at all. 1,000 kilometers away, the father figure really differently behaves very differently, and the son is crushed, and then we are crying we are crying for the sadness of the father rather than the child. So fathers are important, my book seems to be saying, but then it all changes in geography, culture, civilization, so forth and so on.
The one other question I would have for you on this, and then maybe it might make sense in a couple of minutes to open it up to questions from the audience, would be also in that address, you make this now tantalizing reference to a Turkish saying with respect to digging a well with a needle. Yes. And you say that is what the act of writing is.
Yes, this is the point where Hemingway fishing, I'm a writer.
Yes.
Or me digging a well, I'm a writer.
With a needle.
With a needle.
So what's the water? What's the water when you're a writer?
Now you're getting very allegorical now. And
It's 7:40 on a Friday night.
trying to read me in a medieval way. I wouldn't say what's the water, but yes, father here also is related to an authoritarian figure. Perhaps I'm referring to Turkish politics. In fact, the country got, my country got, the leaders of the country got authoritarian. I thought, wow, why don't I go into this subject with my novel? But when I write novels, even like this one, political, anthropological, I don't write a novel to point, you're guilty, you're a bad guy. I don't do that. I may do that in my interviews, in my journalistic pieces, this or that. But in my novels, I want to be deeper than, and for me, the formula for that really is that the guy you cannot understand, try to identify with him.
So my favorite experience of teaching your work is to teach your novel Snow. And what I do with my students is I get to this one sequence involving the militant blue and a group of other characters. And the way Orhan sets this up, they're characters who represent every possible view of the relationship between religion, politics, violence, the secular state.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. Now I'm blushing, but I'm brown, so you can't tell. But they're all in this page together, in this sequence, and I have my students read this sequence, and then I say, find Pamuk's perspective in this, and it's impossible to find your perspective.
I'm proud of this.
Well, rightly so, because that to me is what the highest kind of literature does. Tell me what Shakespeare thinks about kings. Good luck, right?
Yes.
Why is it, though, that is... how do you move from that into, then, the opinion-making that you would do elsewhere?
Yes, I'm upset about saying vulgar things, simplified things, but then there are people in trouble. I may also end up in that trouble, so I have to also defend myself as I defend them. And then, 130,000 people were fired from their jobs, 50,000 people are in jail in Turkey, 200 journalists, some of them my friends, novelists, not because of their novels, in jail. So you feel an oblige, you feel a responsibility. I feel guilty being outside. So I have to, I'm working the last 2 years more than ever. You know why? Because you feel guilty. At least let me write my novels. And then also, you want to defend your friend.
Then you go on CNN or something like this.
Yes, or you receive endless emails. So and so is in jail. Would you sign this petition? So and say, why don't you, Pamuk, say something? It's a responsibility. And simple theories. Oh, I don't want to do this. This is not quality literature. I'm not going to say this. I'm not going to defend your husband because it's not quality literature. I'm not going to say that.
No,
I'm a normal person. So you feel obliged.
Yes.
You try to do your best.
And you do the both and, I think, like no one else writing today.